Our first acquaintance was like a scene from a movie. She was standing on the edge of the bridge, her white hair glistening in the sunlight, and her blue eyes reflecting the sky. I couldn't help but notice her in the crowd. My day was normal, but this moment changed everything. She was holding a book in her hands, engrossed in it so much that she did not notice anything around her. I accidentally bumped into her and the book fell out of her hands. Picking it up, I saw words on the cover that I had often reread myself. "This is my favorite book," I said. She looked at me, and I will remember this meeting for the rest of my life. We decided to talk, and it was one of the best conversations of my life. Her voice was soft, but there was something strong in it that attracted. She talked about her favorite books, and I listened to her with admiration. We were sitting in the park on a bench. The birds were singing around us, and the wind was playing with her long white hair. The rays of the sun shone in her blue eyes, and I knew I was seeing something special. "Will we see each other again?" I asked when I had to leave. She smiled and said, "Maybe, the next time we met by chance, although I can't say I wasn't looking for her." She was standing by a bookshelf in a small bookstore, her white hair cascading over her shoulders. I think I caught her attention with my clumsy way of trying to find the right book. "Help you?" she asked, and I knew it was her. We chose the same book, and this became another moment that brought us closer. This time we walked around the city together. I offered to walk her home, and she agreed. We talked about small things, but every word she said seemed important. Her laughter was like music whenever I said something funny. We stopped by a street musician playing the violin, and for a moment it seemed like the whole world stopped. Her white hair and my black hair created a contrast that everyone around noticed, but only her voice was important to me. The next day I couldn't stop thinking about her. Her image remained in my memory so vividly, as if she had always been a part of my life. We exchanged numbers, and I dared to text her first. Her answer came almost immediately, and it filled me with warmth. We agreed to meet again, and I couldn't wait for that moment. It was the beginning of a story that could change everything. Our next meeting was spontaneous, but at the same time as if planned by fate itself. We agreed to drink coffee in a small cafe hidden between old houses. She came a little earlier and was already sitting at the table by the window. Her white hair fell in waves on her shoulders, and her blue eyes watched intently the rain that pattered on the glass. I approached, and, apologizing for being late, I noticed how she smiled warmly. We talked for hours about dreams, life, and what makes us happy. Her voice was like the soft rustling of autumn leaves, and her eyes were like the promise of a new beginning. When we left the cafe, it was still raining, but that didn't stop us from walking. The streets shone from the lights of the lanterns, which were reflected in the puddles. I offered her my umbrella, but she refused, saying that she liked to feel the raindrops on her face. Her white hair became slightly damp, but that only added to her charm. We walked side by side, laughed, and talked about everything that came to mind. Her laughter rang like bells, and I couldn't help but admire how easily she brought joy to even the simplest moments. The next meeting was not so easy. We argued. She was late, and I, unable to hold back my emotions, expressed my displeasure. Her blue eyes flashed like lightning, and I knew I had touched something deep. She replied that every minute of her life is scheduled, and it is difficult for her to find time even for herself. I felt guilty for not understanding her. We were silent for a few minutes, but then she said quietly, "I don't want this to be the reason for the distance between us." Her words were sincere, and I realized that it is important for us to be patient with each other. A few days after the argument, I decided to invite her to dinner to apologize. It was a restaurant with a cozy atmosphere, candles, and soft music. She came, a little embarrassed, but still charming in her dark dress, which accentuated her delicacy. We talked about our misunderstanding, and I tried to explain how important it is for me to spend time together. Her blue eyes softened with every word I said. "I appreciate you trying to understand me," she said. And this evening was an important step for us to understand each other better. One day, she offered to take part in a local charity event together. It was unexpected, but I agreed. We helped organize the book fair together, and it was an interesting experience. I saw her in a new light, active, confident, so determined. She worked among people, smiled, answered questions, and I understood how much she affects everyone around her. We organized books together, joked, and from time to time our views crossed. That was the day I felt we were truly a team, even in such simple things. After the fair, we decided to spend the evening together. I invited her to my place, preparing a simple dinner. She laughed as I talked about my failed attempts to learn to cook, and her laughter echoed in the room, filling it with warmth. We talked until late at night, sharing memories from the past. She talked about her family, about how much she misses the sea where she grew up. Her voice sounded so sincere, and her eyes sparkled in the dim light of the lamp. It was an evening that stayed with me forever. Her openness and tenderness became even closer to me. A few weeks later, an unexpected offer appeared in her life: participation in a large international project related to art. It was something she had always dreamed of, but it also meant she would have to leave town for a few months. She told me about it, and I could see her eyes light up with excitement, but at the same time there was fear in them. "I don't know if I can leave everything here," she said. I felt emotions fighting inside me, the desire to support her and the fear of losing her. But I knew what was important to her, so I said, "You have to do it. I'll support you." The day of her departure came, and it was harder than I expected. We met at the train station, and she was standing with her suitcase, her white hair pulled back but a few strands sticking out, playing in the sun. Her blue eyes were sad, but at the same time full of determination. "I'll write every day," she said, and I nodded, smiling, though inside I was struggling to let her go. We hugged, and that moment stayed with me. When the train left, I stood and watched her wave her hand through the window. It was the beginning of a new phase for both of us. Her absence became a great test for me. We corresponded every day, sometimes called, but it could not replace her presence. She shared photos and stories about her project, and I tried to be her support, even from a distance. One night, she sent me a text saying, "It's beautiful here, but I miss you." Her words made me feel warm and longing at the same time. I realized how important it had become for me to wait for her return. In those moments, I thought about how our relationship is being tested, but also growing stronger. When she came back, it was like a dream. I was waiting for her at the same station where we said goodbye. She stepped out of the carriage, her white hair glistening in the sun, and her blue eyes searching for me in the crowd. When our eyes met, I knew that all the months of waiting had been worth it. She came closer, and I noticed how she had changed, more confident, but still just as gentle. "I'm home," she said, and those words filled me with warmth. We embraced, and that moment was not only the end of our separation, but the beginning of a new chapter. After her return, we decided to spend a quiet evening together. I invited her over, and we cooked dinner together. Her laughter echoed as I clumsily tried to cut vegetables, and she corrected me with a light joke. "How did you even survive without me?" We sat at the table, discussing everything that had happened in recent months. She talked about the project, about the new people she met, and how it helped her understand herself better. Her words were sincere, and her eyes shone as she looked at me. I realized that this evening had become important for both of us, as a symbol of a new beginning. The next day, she suggested a walk to a place that was special to her. It was an old park on the outskirts of the city where she loved to draw as a child. She brought a notebook and pencils with her to resume this tradition. I sat next to her, watching her hands confidently draw lines on the paper. Her face was focused, but calm at the same time. "I always come here when I'm looking for inspiration," she said, looking away from her notebook. This moment was filled with silence and beauty. I felt that I was beginning to better understand her inner world, which had always seemed so mysterious. We spent the evening of the same day on the coast, watching the sun sink below the horizon. Her white hair reflected the last rays of light, and her blue eyes were directed into the infinite distance. "Have you ever wondered what happiness means to you?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, but the words came out very clearly. I thought for a moment and then replied, "Happiness is moments like this. You are there and I don't need anything else." She smiled, and I saw in her eyes the same thing I felt myself. It was an evening when our feelings became even stronger. Our relationship began to gain strength, but life always brings new challenges. She received unexpected news. Her old friend, whom she had not seen for a long time, had returned to town. He became an important part of her past, and their meeting made me excited. "We were very close," she said of him. "I tried to hide my emotions, but I couldn't help but wonder if this would affect us." Her words sounded sincere, but I felt a slight anxiety. That was the moment I realized that trust is the foundation without which we cannot move forward. After a long conversation, I decided that the most important thing for me was to support her. The next day, she introduced me to a friend of hers, and that helped clear my doubts. He was friendly and talked about their childhood adventures with such warmth that I began to understand why he was so important to her. She looked at him as a friend, and that gave me peace. As we left, she said quietly, "You've done more for me than you can imagine. Thank you for trusting me." Her words were etched in my memory because I knew that we had become even closer. After our meeting with her friend, I felt the tension in me gradually disappear. We decided to spend the weekend together, relaxing from all worries. She suggested a walk to a lake near the city, and I agreed, happy to be near her. We took blankets, a basket of snacks, and set off. The sun was shining brightly, and her white hair glistened under its rays. She laughed as I clumsily spread out the blanket, and together we enjoyed a quiet day in nature. Her blue eyes were filled with peace, and I felt this moment bring us back into harmony. In the evening, when the sun went down, we stayed by the lake, lighting a small flashlight. We sat on the blanket, watching the stars that gradually filled the sky. She leaned closer to me, and I felt how the peace of this place penetrated into our hearts. "Have you thought about what you want most in life?" she asked. Her question got me thinking. "Probably to have someone to share these moments with," I replied. She smiled, and I saw understanding in her eyes. This conversation became one of those that remain in memory forever. The next day, she shared with me her new project, creating a series of paintings for a major exhibition. I could see how the idea turned her on, but also made her anxious. "I'm not sure if I'll be able to finish everything in time," she said, holding the sketch in her hands. I offered to help, even though I was not an artist. "You can be creative and I'll take care of the organization," I said, and she smiled, accepting my offer. This became our joint challenge, which brought us not only a lot of work, but also an even greater understanding of each other. We often stayed in her studio late into the night, working on painting after painting. She drew, staring intently at the canvas, while I arranged the materials, gave suggestions, or simply silently observed her work. Once I made her tea, and she gratefully accepted the cup, sitting next to me. "I wouldn't have managed without you," she said, and her blue eyes shone with fatigue, but also with the satisfaction of what she had done. I smiled as I replied, "You're doing great. I'm just there." These nights have become special for us as a symbol of our common path. Finally, the day of the exhibition arrived. She looked incredible, wearing a simple yet sophisticated dress that accentuated her delicacy. We stood together in the gallery watching people admire her work. Her blue eyes shone with pride as she talked about her paintings. I stood a little to the side, watching her shine in the crowd. "Thanks for being there," she said as she approached me later. I will never forget how you helped me. This day was not only a triumph of her talent, but also a confirmation of how important we are to each other. After the exhibition, we decided to celebrate. She suggested spending the evening in a small restaurant where live music is always playing. We took a table by the window from where there was a view of the city at night, illuminated by thousands of lights. She looked incredible. Her white hair gently fell on her shoulders, and her blue eyes reflected the light of the candles. I noticed how her face radiated satisfaction and calmness after all the effort. We raised our glasses of wine, and she looked at me and said, "It was not just my success, it was our joint victory." Her words left a warm response in my heart, and I realized how important it was to be there. The next morning, as we sat at breakfast, she shared a new idea. "I want to organize a charity project to help young artists find their way," she said, her voice ringing with enthusiasm. I saw new dreams light up in her blue eyes. "It's going to be hard, but I know you can do it," I replied, supporting her. We started discussing possible plans, and I offered to help with the organization. Her smile was so genuine that I couldn't help but admire her determination. It was the moment I felt our goals intertwined and we were building something more than just a relationship. To implement her idea, we gathered a small team of like-minded people. It was the first meeting, and I could see how nervous she was. She prepared a presentation to explain her idea, and every word she said sounded confident, though there was a hint of excitement in her blue eyes. I watched the team react and saw that everyone was charmed by her charisma. When the meeting was over, she came up to me and quietly said, "Thank you for being here. I wouldn't have dared without you." I replied that I was proud of her, and we hugged, knowing that there was a lot of work ahead of us. But we were together. The work on the project was exhausting, but she never lost her enthusiasm. We spent long evenings planning, reviewing ideas, and discussing every detail. She often stayed late to work, and I made her coffee and brought her snacks. "You're my guardian angel," she joked, as I once again covered her with a blanket to keep her from freezing. I saw her efforts pay off and realized that we are closer as we work towards a shared dream. These were the moments that filled my heart with warmth, because I knew that together we could do anything. Finally, the day came when we presented the first results of our project. She looked happy but a little tired when we opened a small exhibition for young artists. Her paintings hung next to the work of emerging talent, and I could see her blue eyes light up with pride. Visitors expressed their admiration, and I heard some thanking her for the opportunity. At the end of the evening, we stood together at the door, and she whispered, "This is just the beginning." Her words were filled with determination, and I knew we would continue to build this future together. That evening, after the exhibition closed, we were left alone in the gallery. She walked slowly between the paintings, touching the frames, as if remembering every detail of the journey that had brought her here. Her white hair gently fell on her shoulders, and her blue eyes shone with emotion. "It seems unreal," she said, stopping at one of the canvases. I came closer and said, "It's because of you that this became a reality." Her gaze was filled with gratitude. We talked for a long time about everything we went through together, and I realized that this project not only changed her, but also helped us become closer. A few days later, she shared a new idea. "I want to create more opportunities for young artists. It has to be more than an exhibition," she said, her voice full of determination. Together, we developed a plan, a series of masterclasses and lectures for beginners. She spoke enthusiastically about how she wants to share her experience and inspire others. I saw her eyes light up with each new thought. "I'll be there to help you with everything," I said, and she smiled. "Then I know for sure we will." One evening, as we were wrapping up another meeting, I suggested a walk to the nearest park. The evening was quiet, and all around could be heard the rustling of trees and the singing of night birds. She talked about how she always dreamed of creating something meaningful, and I listened with admiration. Suddenly it started to rain, and we hid under a big tree. Her white hair was a little wet, and her blue eyes sparkled like when she was a child. "I love the rain," she said, laughing, and in that moment I realized how special everything we were going through together was. Our master classes began with a big event, an open day in her studio. We invited young artists to interact with her and get inspired. I watched as she explained techniques and told stories from her experiences. Her blue eyes shone as she saw the delighted faces of the listeners. I helped organize the event, but every time I found myself gazing at her in fascination. This day became important not only for her, but also for everyone who came, because she shared not only knowledge, but also her soul. After a busy day, we decided to return to a place that has become special for us, the lake. The night was clear and the sky was covered with thousands of stars. We sat on the shore, covered with one blanket, and talked about everything: the past, the future, and what we want. Her voice was calm and her blue eyes looked at me with warmth. "I'm glad we're doing this together," she said, and I felt the words fill me with peace. This evening was a reminder that the most important thing in life is the moments we create together. One day she admitted that she felt tired. Her projects grew, and although they brought success, she lost inspiration. We sat in the studio, among the canvases she could not finish. "I don't know what to create next," she said, lowering her head. Her blue eyes looked confused, and I could see she was struggling. "Sometimes you just have to stop and be yourself," I said, sitting next to him. She was silent for a few moments, then quietly added, "You're right. I've forgotten what it's like to just enjoy the process." This conversation was the beginning of her return to herself. I suggested that she go out of town for a change of scenery. We went to a small village where there was an old wooden house on a hill. The view from there was incredible: endless fields surrounded by forest and a distant lake sparkling under the sun. She was standing on the veranda holding a cup of tea and breathing in the cool air. Her white hair swayed gently in the wind. "It's so peaceful here," she said, smiling. I realized that this silence and nature is helping her to find what she has been looking for so long. It was a much-needed break for both of us. These days outside the city helped her find a new idea. She took a notebook with her and started drawing right on the hill. Her lines were crisp and confident, as was her gaze as she gazed into the horizon. "I want to create a series about the harmony of nature and man," she said when we returned home. Her words sounded like before, when her projects were just beginning. I felt something change in her. She became who she was again. It inspired me too, because her energy always had an effect on both of us. When she presented a new series of paintings, the exhibition was an incredible success. Her works were captivating, showing the beauty of nature in its simplicity, which we often overlook. She stood in the center of the gallery. Journalists, critics, and spectators gathered around her. Her blue eyes shone with joy and gratitude. I watched from a distance, not interfering in this moment of her triumph, but she still looked at me and smiled softly. This exhibition was not only her success, but also the moment when I realized that our joint efforts had changed both of us. After the exhibition, we decided to celebrate this success together. But after returning home, she received a letter with an invitation to an international artist competition. It was something she had dreamed of for a long time, but taking part meant a long journey. Her face changed as she read the letter, and I felt her emotions struggle, admiration and fear at the same time. "This is a huge opportunity," I said, trying to support her. She looked at me and I saw uncertainty in her eyes. "I don't want to leave everything here," she replied, but I knew her dreams were more important. We talked for a long time that night. She talked about her fears, about how hard it is to leave everything we built together. I'm afraid this trip will change something, she said, looking at me with her blue eyes full of doubt. I took her hand and answered, "This will only change the fact that you will become even closer to your dream, and I will always be here, waiting for you." Her smile was quiet but sincere. "We made this decision together. She will go to the pageant, but we will keep our closeness." It was a moment when we both realized how important support is. The next few weeks were spent preparing for her trip. Together we compiled her materials, discussed presentations, and even chose clothes for events. She looked happy, but I could see a slight sadness in her eyes. "I will miss this," she once said, holding her favorite painting in her hands. I smiled and replied, "This is just a phase. You have many moments like this ahead of you, and I will always be there for you when you come back." We understood that the separation would not be easy, but it was a step she had to take. On the eve of her departure, we decided to spend the evening together. I made dinner, lit candles, and selected her favorite music. She looked incredible. Her white hair shone in the soft light, and her blue eyes glowed with warmth. We laughed, remembered all our shared moments, and talked about the future. "I don't know how I'll manage without you," she said at the end of the evening, and I replied, "You will, because you are strong, and I will always wait to meet again." This evening remained in my memory as one of the warmest moments of our history. The day of her departure has come. We were standing at the station, and I could see how nervous she was, although she tried not to show it. Her suitcase was neatly packed, and in her hands she held a journal that I had given her so that she could write down her thoughts during the trip. "Promise to text me every day," I said, and she smiled as she nodded. When the train pulled up, I helped her sit down, and we hugged. "I'll get back to you," she said before the door closed. I remained on the platform, watching the train pull away, feeling a mixture of pride and longing inside me. A few days passed after her departure, and I already missed her. One evening I received her first letter. She described the new city, the people she met, and her first impressions of the competition. "Everything here seems so big and unfamiliar, but I think about you every day," she wrote. I smiled as I read those words and felt them bring warmth even from a distance. She ended the letter with a promise. "When it's all over, I'll be back and we'll make more memories." Her words were what sustained me during this time of separation. The weeks she spent at the pageant were difficult for both of us. She was preparing for performances and workshops, and I continued to work, waiting for her letters. One day, while I was doing my business, I received a message from her on my phone. "You have no idea how inspiring it is when you support me even from a distance," she wrote. I felt my heart swell with pride. She performed at the competition and received the first favorable reviews. "This is our success," she said in the subsequent letter. I realized that her achievements were not only her personal triumph, but also our collective victory. A few days after her performance, I received a call from her, and her voice was full of joy. "I found old friends who helped me find new opportunities. It's great." She said that she met famous artists who were impressed by her works. Her enthusiasm was contagious, and I, without holding back my emotions, replied, "I'm proud of you." However, over time, new difficulties appeared. She began to work even more, and our conversations became less frequent. I could feel the distance between us beginning to reappear. This feeling was a test for me, but I decided that we should talk about it when she returned. When she returned home, I noticed that there was a distance between us again. She was full of new experiences, her gaze was full of energy, but she couldn't seem to find time for us. We spent evenings, but most of them were silent, each of us focused on our own world. I began to miss those moments when we could just talk without any worries or projects. One day during a quiet dinner, I decided to talk about it. "You have changed. We have become distant from each other." She was silent for a few minutes, then replied, "I just think so much about the future that I forget what's important right now. It was a difficult conversation, but it became important for us. She looked at me with her blue eyes and said, "You're right. I just got so caught up in my project that I forgot about us." We talked for a long time. It is clear that our love needs not only support, but also time for each other. I want us to be together again, not just because of work, but because of what we have. Her words sounded sincere, and I could feel the trust growing between us again. This was the moment when we reconnected, deciding that both our worlds should exist in parallel without losing each other. A few days after our conversation, we went for a walk in a place that was important to both of us, a park where we spent a lot of time early in our relationship. It was like going back to the beginning. "This is where it all started," she said as we sat on a bench looking at the trees that were starting to change color for fall. I nodded, looking at her white hair gently swaying in the wind. In her eyes, I saw again the same confidence we had at the beginning. And then I understood. Despite all the difficulties, we will stay together, because the most important thing is to be there for each other. Ever since we decided to put each other first again, we've come to appreciate every moment together more. She began to find time for herself and for us, and I learned to support her more, even in difficult situations. One such situation occurred when she received an invitation to an international exhibition, but the time frame was very tight, and it required a lot of effort. She felt overwhelmed, and I saw her staying up at night working on new projects. Then I decided I had to do more to help her. "We'll do it together," I said, and she replied with a smile, "Thanks for your support." Despite the busy schedule, we continued to work together as a team. I helped her with the organization of materials for the exhibition, and she devoted time to finishing the paintings. We went over every detail of her work together, discussing what could still be improved. Her eyes lit up as she described her ideas, and I felt our relationship grow stronger with each passing moment. As hard as it was, I could see her returning to the inspiration that brought us together in the first place. We decided that we will continue to work on her projects while not forgetting about ourselves. A few weeks later, her exhibition began to gain momentum. The first part of her work has already been presented, and the reaction of people was incredible. She sat in the gallery, watching how visitors interestedly examined her canvases. Her white hair was neatly pulled back and her blue eyes radiated pride. I could see her works being mesmerizing and could feel our partnership growing stronger. "You're incredible," I said as I approached her. She turned to me, smiled, and quietly said, "It's thanks to you. You've always been my support." When we returned home after the exhibition, we were greeted by an unexpected visitor, her former mentor from university. He came to see her work, and his feedback was enthusiastic. But his words about how big the prospect is waiting for her added some pressure. I could see her listening, her blue eyes full of doubt and thought. "I never thought I would be able to get here," she said after visiting him. I understood that these words caused her new worries. "You're already here, and this is your victory." "You deserve everything," I said, and she looked at me with complete confidence in herself. After visiting the mentor, she looked as if she was deep in thought. "Am I ready for all this?" she asked, sitting on the edge of the bed, her gaze focused on her hands. Her white hair was loose and her blue eyes looked sad. I sat down next to her and took her hand. "You are ready because you have already taken the first step. All you need is to believe in yourself." She nodded silently, and I felt how we became one again. This was our great victory, not only her success, but also our journey together. We went through this stage together, and I knew there were many more discoveries ahead for us. After several weeks of thinking, she made an important decision: to go to an international exhibition in Paris. It was an opportunity she couldn't pass up. I could see her blue eyes shining with delight as she packed her things. "I'm worried if I'm ready for this," she said, pausing for a moment. I approached her and said, "You were always ready. This is your place, and you deserve it." She smiled appreciatively, and I felt us grow closer to each other again, as we always do when we support our dreams. When she left, I stayed at home to do my own thing, but I noticed how her absence filled my space with silence. I wrote her letters and waited for her calls. She shared her impressions of Paris, enthusiastic stories about new people, exhibitions, new paintings. She was happy, but I could feel how she missed my presence. I understood that, although we were far away, our thoughts were always with each other. Her letters became more and more warm, and I could feel us becoming even closer, even from a distance. In Paris, her work received critical acclaim, and she began to feel part of a larger artistic community. She wrote to me about her fascination with the city rhythm, street artists, museums. "You would definitely like it here. There is so much new and unexplored here," she wrote. I felt proud of her, but also missed her absence. She walked the streets of Paris, her white hair flowing smoothly as she observed life around her. I imagined her walking these ancient streets, and I had the feeling that she was discovering a new world, but still there was an emptiness in my heart. She came back from Paris a few weeks later, and I saw a change in her eyes. She was calmer, but at the same time more confident. I realized that I need to move on. "I want to open my studio here in our city," she said when we met. I saw in her words not only a new dream, but also a new understanding of who she wants to be. I supported her because I knew that this was not just a wish, but her way. We started planning how to implement her idea. Now we are not only a couple, but also partners in something important to both of us. Our life has changed. We not only dreamed, but also began to act. She opened her studio for artists, where she held workshops and exhibitions. I was there, organizing all the details, supporting her every step of the way. Together, we built this place, which became not only a business, but also a place for inspiration. Every day I have seen her flourish in what she does, and I could feel our relationship becoming even stronger as we both work towards our goals, overcoming all obstacles together. This was only the beginning of our great journey. Our studio was gaining momentum. However, with each new project, we felt more and more burdened. My support became even more important because she started working with more students, organizing personal exhibitions, and I took care of the business side of things. It was difficult, but at the same time we became even closer. She began to see in me not just a partner, but also a person who can be relied on in any situation. One evening, after a long day, she said, "I couldn't have done it without you." Her words were simple, but they filled me with a sense of the significance of what we had created together. One day, we received an invitation to participate in a large international exhibition. It was an opportunity we couldn't ignore. She looked worried when she got the message, but at the same time her eyes lit up with excitement. "This could change everything," she said, a new confidence in her voice. I supported her even though we both knew it would be another big step forward. It was a new opportunity and we had to be ready for all the challenges. We discussed how to prepare for this event, dividing tasks and planning each step. We worked day and night preparing for the exhibition. She painted new paintings, I handled the logistics, making sure everything was organized. She often stayed in the studio late, losing track of time, immersed in her work. Sometimes when I visited her, she seemed so engrossed in the process that she didn't even notice the time passing. I brought her coffee and waited for her to take a break. "I so want it all to work," she said, looking at her paintings. Her words sounded with a sense of purpose, but also of anxiety that things might not work out. I answered, "It will work because you put your soul into every detail." It was getting closer to the opening day of the exhibition, and I could see her getting more and more tense. Her hands often trembled as she put the finishing touches on her paintings. "Is everything ready?" she asked, looking at me doubtfully. I tried to reassure her. "Everything will be great. You've been preparing for this all your life." She looked at me in disbelief, but I could see that her inner calm was beginning to return, and that was the main thing. "You always know how to put me at ease," she said, smiling, and I answered, "Because I believe in you." Finally, the day of the exhibition's opening has arrived. We came to the gallery where visitors had already gathered. She stood next to her paintings, her white hair neatly pulled back and her blue eyes shining with confidence. I stood a little to the side, watching her. Everyone admired her work, and I could see her beaming at the knowledge that her work was appreciated. In the evening, we stayed at the gallery after closing, and she said, "It was the best event of my life." I replied, "Because you deserve it." And then we realized that this is only the beginning of our joint journey, and many new achievements await us ahead. After the exhibition, we began to receive more and more requests to organize new masterclasses and collaborations. But with each new project, she became more and more busy. I could see how her schedule was full and she rarely found time for herself. One evening, when she was working late into the night, I approached her and asked, "Aren't you tired?" She looked at me with her blue eyes and an embarrassed smile appeared on her face. "Maybe a little," she admitted. "I sat down next to you and said, 'You deserve a break. Let's take a break.'" We spent the evening together, calmly looking through old photos and remembering moments that have always kept us close. However, her inspiration did not fade even when she was tired. One morning, after we visited a local park, she came home with a new sketch, and her eyes were full of energy. "It's not just a painting," she said, showing me her work. "It's a reflection of everything I've been through in the last few months." I was amazed at her ability to see beauty in even the smallest details. She found new inspiration again, even when she thought that everything had burned out. I looked at her work, and this painting became a symbol of her resilience and determination. Despite the increasing demand for her work, she felt that she needed more time for herself, and I supported her decision to take a few weeks off. We went to a small remote town where life was slower and where she could just enjoy the simple joys. We spent days in nature, walking in the woods, boating on the lakes, and I could see her face light up with peace. Her gaze became clear, and her words light and carefree. It was a time when we went back to basics, where every moment together was priceless. After our rest, we returned to the city with renewed energy. She decided she wanted to create an art foundation that would help young artists get an education and develop their talents. It was her big dream to make art accessible to everyone who wants to learn. We started working on the concept of the fund, looking for partners and sponsors. She was determined, and I supported her every step of the way. This was another big goal, and I knew that together we could change many lives. A few months later, we opened a fund for young artists. She looked amazing, her blue eyes shining with happiness as she stood in front of a group of people at the opening. We brought together many artists, educators, and patrons, and that was the moment when everything became a reality. She spoke to the audience, talking about her goal and how important it is to help new talents. I stood by her side, and my pride in her accomplishments was boundless. "This is just the beginning," she said after the performance, and I nodded, knowing that this was only the first step to the great future we were building together. One evening, after the successful launch of the fund, we received an unexpected guest. It was an old colleague of hers who had worked with her before she became a famous artist. He brought with him a proposal for a joint exhibition in another country. She was surprised because they had not talked for a long time. "It's a great opportunity," he said, but her face showed doubt. I saw her blue eyes darken with thought. "I don't know if I'm ready to go back on stage so soon," she said quietly. I went to her, put my hand on her shoulders, and said, "You don't have to answer everything now. We will decide together what is best for you." It was our next joint struggle with decisions that change our future. After several days of thought and discussion, we made a decision. She decided that this project was not a priority, and that she needed more time to develop her foundation and help young artists. I know it's important, but right now I want to focus on something more meaningful, she said, and I could feel her words filled with confidence. We agreed together that our dreams may be different, but we will be together, supporting each other. This moment was significant for us because we realized that not only great achievements are important, but also a common goal that unites us. We decided to start a new stage together, to train in new areas of art. She began to learn new drawing techniques that she had wanted to master for a long time. I supported her in this, even if it meant spending more time in the studio or working on new projects for the foundation. Every day brought new discoveries, and I could see how she put her soul into every stroke. "This is my new beginning," she said when she saw the results of her first new painting. I replied, "You always surprise me with your strength and creativity." We rejoiced at each new achievement, knowing that together we could overcome any difficulties. Despite successes, sometimes difficulties return. Once, when we were organizing a new exhibition for young artists, things did not go according to plan. One of the suppliers did not bring materials, and some participants delayed their works. She was disappointed and upset. I could see how her usual optimism began to fade. I went over and said, "Don't worry, we'll fix everything. It's just a temporary inconvenience." We worked together to solve the problem, and thanks to our joint efforts, the exhibition still went well. She looked at me when she finished and said, "You're always on my side." Her words strengthened our relationship again, and I felt that even in difficult moments we can always rely on each other. When the exhibition finally took place and received positive feedback, we realized that we were ready to take another step forward. She decided to open her own gallery for young artists in order to support them not only through the foundation, but also to provide a space for exhibitions and creative meetings. This step was the culmination of all our efforts, and I felt like we were creating something meaningful together. "This is our joint achievement," she said, and I saw her blue eyes light up with pride. I nodded, knowing that our journey was just beginning. Our gallery began to attract more and more attention. The first exhibitions were very successful, and the number of visitors increased every week. She was incredibly happy to see how young artists get the opportunity to present their work in such conditions. We worked together again. I helped organize events, and she managed the creative process. Gradually, the gallery became not just a place for exhibitions, but also a space for communities and creative meetings. "We've really transformed this place," she said, looking at the happy exhibitors. "We not only show art, but also create new opportunities for others." I felt how she grew as a person and an artist, and we were together on this great journey. Despite the successes, new difficulties arose. With the increase in the number of visitors and exhibitions, organizational issues have become even more difficult. One day we ran into problems again. Several artists did not deliver their work on time, and we had to urgently solve the situation. She looked tired, but still didn't give up. "We'll make it. I just don't want to let them down," she said, as I watched her try to solve all the questions. We worked late into the night, and although I was tired, I knew that we would overcome all difficulties as always. I told her, "You are not alone. We will do it together." She looked at me and smiled softly when she saw that I was around again. One evening, after the end of another big exhibition, she sat on the couch, her eyes tired and full of doubts. "I don't think I can do it anymore," she said quietly, her white hair falling over her shoulders. I sat next to her, took her hand, and replied, "You are doing everything right. All difficulties are part of the journey. I see how you change people, how you inspire them. You have already done more than most people can do in their entire life." Her eyes filled with tears, but she did not cry. She only said, "Thank you for always believing in me." It was a moment when I realized how important it is to support each other, not only in moments of triumph, but also when it is difficult. A few days later, she came to me with a new idea. She wants to hold a master class for artists to help them find their own style. She said, "I forgot why I started all this, because I love art, not because of the demands." Her words, full of sincerity, restored her connection with creativity. "You've found your way again," I said, seeing her blue eyes fill with admiration again. She began to prepare a course aimed at the development of artists, and I felt how she was returning to herself, to the true creative I that became the basis of her success. It was a moment of real awakening for her. As the year came to an end, we looked back at all that we had accomplished: exhibitions, projects, new dreams, new relationships. She looked relaxed as she sat on the couch and said, "It's been a tough year, but it's also the biggest year I've learned about myself." I looked at her, and in her eyes I saw not only change, but also a deep understanding of what true art means. It is not only the pictures on the wall, but also the path we walk together. We raised our glasses, and she said, "For our dreams and for being together." This was our year, and I knew there were many more great moments to come. At the beginning of the new year, we decided to expand the gallery. However, this was associated with new challenges. A larger space required more resources, and also needed new ideas to attract an even larger audience. She looked a bit worried as we discussed how to arrange this. "I'm afraid we might lose everything if something goes wrong," she said, her blue eyes filled with worry. I looked at her and replied, "We've proven time and time again that we can take it all together. You did it, and we'll do it again." She smiled, and I could see her confidence returning. We started working on a new concept for the gallery. She decided to focus on interactive exhibitions where visitors could participate in the creation of art. It was ambitious, but she was adamant that it could be a game changer. We organized the first exhibition according to the new format, and everything was prepared, from the space to the materials, and, of course, the concept. As soon as the gallery doors opened, we saw enthusiastic visitors actively interacting with the works on display. That was the moment I realized that her ideas had a powerful effect on people. She looked at me gratefully. "It works." Her eyes shone with joy. After the success of this exhibition, we received even more offers from other cities and even countries. It became a real challenge because we didn't have enough time to prepare for each of them. She was amazed, but also upset, because she understood that she would not be able to do everything in time. I could see how her emotions were mixed. She was ready for new opportunities, but also afraid of losing important moments from our lives. "We have a choice," I said. "We can do this together and not let the important moments disappear." She looked at me gratefully and nodded. Over time, we came to the conclusion that the biggest priority is not the number of exhibitions, but the quality of each of them and our time together. We decided to limit the number of events in order to maintain a balance between work and personal life. She was grateful for this decision, although she was hesitant at first. "I don't want all of this to take away from me what's really important to me," she said. I replied, "We can continue to create and change the world, but we must not lose each other." This was our important step in the search for harmony. After that, we began to plan new horizons for the gallery, which now worked with artists not only from our city, but also from other countries. We decided to open new exhibitions, but with new concepts, to have creative evenings where every visitor could not only see art, but also become a part of it. This was our next big step, and we were ready. She looked at me and said, "Now we know that real art is what we create together, even when things don't always go according to plan." I smiled, knowing this was the start of another great journey for both of us. We finally went abroad to participate in an international exhibition that we had been preparing for several months. It was a great opportunity for both of us, but also a huge stress. She was excited about the new possibilities, but I could see a little tension appear on her face. "I'm really worried about whether we're ready for this," she said, looking at the new works that were to be presented. I went up to her and said, "You're ready. You're not just creating art. You're creating experiences that people want to see." She smiled, and I could tell her confidence was returning. This was our big trip, and we felt ready for all the challenges. The exhibition was a great success, and her works attracted the attention of many collectors and gallerists. I could see how focused she was, but I could see doubt in her eyes. All these new opportunities brought her not only pleasure, but also a certain burden. "I don't know if I want it to be this big," she said when we were in one of those moments of silence between events. I understood her feelings and replied, "It's your way. You shouldn't seek approval if it's not what you want." She looked at me, and I could see her fears gradually recede, replaced by a sense of deeper self-understanding. A few weeks after the exhibition, when all preparations were completed, we met again in private. She was calm, but I could see how deeply she was thinking. "I need to figure out what I want from all of this," she said, her blue eyes filled with doubt. We went for a walk in the park where we first met. It was a place that always brought us peace. We were sitting under a large tree, and she quietly added, "I want to create something that really matters to me, not just to others." I realized that this was a moment of return to her true values. "We will find this way together," I said, and she smiled. After this conversation, we both realized that it is important to find a balance between what we want to achieve and what is really important to us. She decided to reduce the number of events and devote more time to her creativity. I saw her eyes fill with inspiration again. "I want to go back to painting without pressure," she said, and I replied, "We'll do it together. All these great achievements shouldn't take away your soul." We decided to start a new phase, to be true to ourselves and our goals. It was a moment for both of us where we found our place. We started working on a new project to create an exhibition that would be not only for the artists, but also for the audience, so that they could understand and feel each painting. She prepared the concept. I helped with the organization of the space. "It will not be just an exhibition. It will be an experience for everyone," she said with great enthusiasm. I felt how this project brings her not only professional satisfaction, but also inner peace. We worked together, as always, and every day brought new ideas, new ways to develop her creativity and our cooperation.